ready to go.
Could I not? That was me.
Oh, okay. I wasn't looking at my OBS at that second, so I didn't see what that was. But thank you for the follow, man. So hi, I am here. I'm the Centrist 2048 on YouTube. This is one of the Centrist View content areas, and I'm here talking with what's the best way to pronounce your name? Is it Blackbeltginganinja?
Blackbeltginganinja. You can just call me Black Belt or
Black Belt
or BBG. Some people call me BBGN. It's fine too.
All right, Blackbeltginganinja. Thank you, by the way, for showing up and being willing to do this interview and just chat about Mirror's Edge. So why don't you introduce yourself for anyone who doesn't know you?
Okay, well, I'm Black Belt, BBGN. Nick is fine as well. I've been speedrunning for like 6-7 years now, since I was a wee lad at the beginning of high school. I'm probably most known for Mirror's Edge. I'd say that's the game I've sunk the most hours into. I did a pretty infamous run at SGDQ 2017 of Mirror's Edge Glitchless. That's probably what I'm best known for, but I've also dabbled in B-movie game, a bit of SpongeBob SquarePants, just like a lot of little meme stuff here and there. So, super happy to be here.
Awesome. I actually had no idea you were part of SGDQ. I've just got to ask, what was it like? What is the atmosphere at SGDQ? It's on my bucket list of things to do, of places to go.
It's very fun, especially if you know people going in. It's really cool to get to like reunite with or really unite for the first time and meet some of these people you've talked to online for years. I think like when I went, I was super young. I didn't know people. Like it was kind of a meh experience for me, but like I was surrounded by like all these really cool people who are playing really cool games, and like overall, I'd recommend the experience now. I want to go back.
That is awesome. One day when I have some money in my pocket, some jangle, then I'll definitely check out an SGDQ, which kind of will be like my Comic-Con, you know. Well, I suppose, you know, San Diego Comic-Con is like the mecca of nerds, and then anything. But Comic-Con, then you get your more specific stuff. Yeah. So I'll let you know sort of what I'm about. I've been streaming / speedrunning / playing my own niche areas since probably my junior year of college, which was I think around 2017. Not 2017, sorry. I mix up my years. It's like 2019. Yeah, that sounds right. And so for me, what got me into it was I had done a deathless run of Call of Duty Black Ops on normal. And I was telling an acquaintance I knew at college about it, and he didn't believe me. And so that was the first moment I realized I should have some recorded evidence of what I had done in order to then validate it later. Yeah. But sort of the space I've carved out for myself is what I have affectionately coined free solo running, which is running a video game in complete segment with no deaths, basically. No glitches allowed, just run it. The goal is not to die. And if that happens, then in Mirror's Edge, for example, Faith has successfully made it from the first episode, the prologue, all the way to the end without dying, and thus you have completed the story perfectly of the game. That is my idea. But after I do one of these runs, I always then jump into and do a speed run just to see where I sort of am in the spectrum. I think I'm 76th, I want to say, on the glitchless leaderboards, which isn't solidly in the mediocre middle tier of the thing. But what, for transparency, what is your time? Where do you stand?
I believe I have a time of, I'm just pulling the leaderboards now because I wanted the reference. I have a time of 43 minutes and 10 seconds without loads, which used to be, at the time, was world record, but like the run is now 4 years old, so it's been beaten by like 4 other people, so I'm in 5th now.
That is absolutely incredible. I can't imagine. That is amazing. So, for anyone who knows Mirror's Edge, that's amazing.
Well, thank you.
My time is 106.29, although I did that in glitchless, so I think that category is a bit slower. But
that was my glitchless time. I want to specify.
My head.
Not to be that guy.
43 minutes.
My
No!
80% time is like 2903. That's what that one is, which is comparatively worse, I guess, because that's in 8th place. But
So
yeah.
fast.
I've been playing the game for 7 years. It's like, it's hard. It's not fair. It's not fair.
7 years. I've been playing the game for probably 4 months. So 7 years. Tell me, how did you find Mirror's Edge? How did you get into it?
Sure. So I don't really. It's weird because I don't really remember how I got into it per se. I probably bought the game in like 2010. So like after the main craze was done, played it through once, and then just kind of like picked it up and off and on again for like 2 or 3 years. I probably got most into it when I started watching videos of like people going out of bounds, and I thought that was the coolest thing, just like showing off cool out of bounds locations. So to do these weird out of bounds things, I would just like I took my Elgato, which I used to use to record Call of Duty commentary videos, and I just like uploaded these out of bounds things. From there, I learned like all the glitches in the game, and then falling into like this Mirror's Edge content rabbit hole, I found some speedruns. These like individual chapter speedruns, and the game is really good about guiding you there because in game there are like in-level speedruns and in-level leaderboards. So the game really incentivizes you to try that anyway. So I tried the tutorials, I learned each chapter, and then the guy who had been making these chapter tutorials, there's one guy who had like a monopoly on it on YouTube. His name is Oven Donkey. And he was doing full game runs around the time I was watching it. This is a story you'll hear from like a ton of people who joined around the time. Is they started watching Oven Donkey, they started doing full game runs, and then I got kind of from there, from just like lurking in people's streams, I got an invite to like the Skype group of all these Mirror's Edge runners. This was before Discord, so I was in the Skype group for a few years until eventually I like got on the top 15, which nagged me a spot on the Google Sheets leaderboard that some nice community member maintained, and from there I haven't looked back.
Awesome. So Mirror's Edge was your first experience with speedrunning?
Yeah, definitely.
Cool. I've heard that story a couple times in a couple different communities of that there was this one influential video that tons of people saw that then got them into playing the game. But I find it interesting that you didn't necessarily play it when it came out first. So it's not like you had this childhood experience of like nostalgia or remembering something and then picking it up later. For you, it was almost like, how long did it take you from playing the game towards developing into like speedrunning the game?
Yeah, I probably first played the game like when it came out as a demo on my Xbox 360 in like 2009, and I didn't start speedrunning it till 2013, 2014. So, I mean, if you can like guess my age, I was probably like 10 or 12 at the time I first played it. So I definitely played it when I was like a kid, but no, I would say it's like rooted in nostalgia in the same way like Super Mario 64 is for some people, or Ocarina of Time is. But it's just I think it makes up for that nostalgia by having like a real depth of game mechanics that like really sucks you in once you get good at it.
That's true. It's one of those games that I realized when I was playing it that it's very, very easy. It feels easy to play. The mechanics are really fast to pick up, really simple. But then as you play it more and you get a better understanding of how the mechanics actually work, then the skill cap just keeps rising ahead of you as you get better.
Yeah. I always compare it to fighting games like Melee or like, even some of like the more traditional 2D fighting games where it's like, it's very easy to just like go in and mash buttons and feel good. But like once you're learning like the combos and you're learning like the intricacies of it, and even sometimes you're like exploiting the little bits and pieces of the engine, like that's when the game really starts to shine, for me at least.
No, when I was thinking about what game to play next after Jedi Fallen Order, which is the game I started on about a year ago, which had taken me forever to beat. It took me about a year to beat that as a free solo, because the physics are just horrifically built in that game.
That's the new one, right? The one that came out in 2019? Yeah, I just played through that last year, so I feel you on that.
It's, oh man. That's a whole other story. But thinking about then what's the next game to play, I started thinking about Dying Light. And I realized that, well, no, I don't feel comfortable playing Dying Light when there's the foundation to it that exists somewhere else, which is Mirror's Edge sort of created this entire style of parkour running games, which I tend to think of as like a trend. Someone watched a Jason Bourne movie and thought, we can make just to throw out a game into the nether and see what happens. And then it turned out to be really, really good, and it created all these other games. So where do you think Mirror's Edge sort of Do you also think that in terms of that there's now this genre of parkour style games?
Yeah, I think it's fair. It's probably fair to say that Mirror's Edge like isn't the first person platformer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there were others before it, but in terms of bringing it into the mainstream light, I would say it was probably like the biggest one of its genre. And pretty much every first person platformer since then has borrowed from Mirror's Edge or is inspired by Mirror's Edge. So yeah, no, I do think it's foundational in that sense. I agree.
I remember a few months ago, wasn't it? EA or DICE did some sort of European, I think, publicity tour where they threw up a picture of Mirror's Edge Catalyst, and it generated a lot of hype. People were like, "Oh, is there a Mirror's Edge 3 coming? Is there any hope for that? Can we expect to see a Mirror's Edge 3 in the future?"
In my personal opinion, I would say probably not, just because the sales aren't there. I think it's a very niche, vocal, passionate fan base of people who really like this style of game, but it doesn't really resonate with the general audience. And to be fair, I think that's for good reason. I love these games, but I don't think by any means they're perfect games. Neither Mirror's Edge or Catalyst was. So I get why people aren't as infatuated with it as I am, but I like to cross my fingers and hope. I wouldn't hold your breath.
All right. Best thing about Mirror's Edge, juxtaposed worst thing about Mirror's Edge, in your opinion.
I'm going to start with the worst thing about Mirror's Edge. I think
that's the fun one. That's the fun one.
I think the worst thing about Mirror's Edge is your first playthrough, because you're struggling through it. You barely understand the game mechanics. If you didn't follow the tutorial like a Bible, you probably don't understand a lot of the wall climb, turn jumping, the wall run, turn jumping, a lot of the advanced mechanics. I think, and I'll say the best thing about Mirror's Edge is your second, third, fourth playthrough. When you know the paths, you're no longer struggling to find where you need to go. The game turns from being a light puzzle platformer to this intense speed momentum platformer, and I think that's where the game really shines. But you have to kind of slog through. I tell people the worst playthrough of Mirror's Edge is your first one, and then it only gets better from there, which is kind of a tough sell, but I think that's where the game really shines.
Interesting. I think that my worst thing is probably the gun physics.
That's another great pick, but that's the thing too. It ties in because I think you can skip the guns on your later playthroughs, but no, go ahead.
Well, playing on normal, which is what I did my free solo on, the guns feel really random. Am I going to get hit here or am I not? Who knows? And especially the one part of my run that I considered to be completely luck, and I couldn't figure out a good way to do this, was jumping out of the elevator in Mall, where you're just suddenly you're in line of sight of this massive machine gun, and every time I did that, I was like, is this just going to be the end of my run right here because they're just going to kill me, or am I going to survive? The best thing, I think, is the difficulty curve, which is laid out so beautifully. It feels like a perfect arc going up. The game, starts with the tutorial, goes into the prologue, and then every chapter, even though it's doing its own sets, it's focusing on its own things, it feels like it's getting more difficult naturally, all the way up until what I would consider to be the most difficult platforming level, which would be 8, I think, and then the most difficult the combat level, which would be 9. And the platforming, by the way, maxing out in the atrium, which is, in my opinion, it's got to be the most infamous single platforming section of that game. I don't know if you would agree with that.
Infamous is a good word for it. I completely agree.
All right. I wasn't gonna ask this, but I got to. Worst death in a run in atrium. Any memories?
I think there's one particular strat right near the beginning of atrium called chimp strats, where essentially, I don't know if you, for people who aren't aware of the way Mirror's Edge physics work, is if there are two parallel walls, you can essentially climb infinitely between them by jumping from one to the next and then just going up and up and up. But atrium walls are very finicky in the sense that sometimes you'll wall run on the reverse side of the wall and you'll just fall off of it. It's just because there's a little bit of misalignment in the collision, and there's that particular misalignment right near a key skip that saves 8 seconds. And it's absolutely brutal because although it saves 8 seconds, you lose 15 when you fail it. So those are probably the toughest parts for me. It's just when the little bits of collision mess you up.
I know. That's one of the things I think in both speedrunning and if you're trying to play a game deathless, where it gets tense, especially near the ends when you've been playing the game for this point, you're showing all green in your splits, or you just survived up to that point, and the hardest stuff for most video games is right at the end. That's the most difficult sections, as they should be, but that also makes it very scary for people playing those games on a high competitive level.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, if you ask around like the Mirror's Edge speedrunning Discord, a lot of people will say they love the Atrium casually. It's one of their favorites once you get to know it. But no, I think in terms of speedrunning, it is not. It is infamous, definitely.
In a vacuum, you love the everyone loves the Atrium when they're not playing. When they're playing, so cool. No one loves the Atrium.
Yeah.
So this then brings me sort of to my next question, which is speedrunning Mirror's Edge specifically in terms of the tricks and glitches. And you mentioned one famous glitch. What would be, in your opinion, your favorite glitch? And then what is the hardest glitch or trick to pull off in Mirror's Edge in a run?
Ooh, that's tough. I think it's hard to distinguish between
You can say a couple
glitches, right?
really hard tricks if you.
I think in terms of favorite glitch, it's kind of like a basic answer, but probably the kick glitch. For those who don't know, if you wall run kick, you get 1 frame of landing at the end of the kick animation where you can then perform an action. And 1 frame window is normally really hard to hit, but if you bind the jump button, say, to your scroll wheel, you can scroll through the 1 frame window, and you can consistently hit that 1 frame window, and essentially you get a double jump using the wall run kick. So anytime there's a wall and a big gap, you just can fly over it, and you can chain those kicks together. And every time you do that, you gain 10 kilometers per hour of speed. So you can get Faith flying through the air between walls at high wave speeds, right? Absolutely ridiculous. And it's so foundational to everything that you probably, in an any percent run, there's probably I've never counted 80, 90, 100 kick glitches. It's so foundational to the route. So it's hard for me to say anything but that is my favorite. Mm-hmm. In terms of my least favorite, I think there's probably some the kick glitch is great, but it opens up all these crazy out of bounds routes that are incredibly finicky. For example, there's one trick at the end of chapter 8, or I guess in the middle of chapter 8. After you get through the first checkpoint, there's the second set of buildings, and because we kick glitch over the first checkpoint in that area, and then that's checkpoint B. To end checkpoint B, we jump into an out of bounds loading trigger to hit the next checkpoint early. But if you miss that loading trigger, you have to go all the way back about a minute and a half. And stuff like that is really brutal. I think the game, a lot of PC speedruns have quick saving and quick loading, so you make a mistake, you lose 3 seconds here and there, it's just little optimizations. But Mirror's Edge is absolutely brutal. You can lose a minute and a half to some of these skips, so it's kind of give or take in that way. Yeah. That's probably the hardest part and the worst part of speedrunning it.
So I think this raises one of the most interesting general questions I have, and I'm going to ask this to every speedrunner that I do an interview with. Why do we do this to ourselves? Really, why do we subject ourselves to this? It's a video game, right? What's the... and it's not just a question of, what gets us into this, because there's definitely the slippery slope aspect to an extent. You start just... you do a run of a game, you beat it, but somewhere in your head you're like, that wasn't good enough. I made too many mistakes. I can do that better. I can do that again. What is your reason for why we speedrun games in general, and why do you speedrun games?
I think it's a couple different things. Probably the 2 main ones are the community. I think getting to improve with people, compete with people, see other people get better. That community aspect of it makes it so much better. It makes you. I think it encourages you to stay. But what gets you into it in the first place is probably, I don't know, just that feeling of improving. The same way people might grind WoW and level up their character and get better and do harder and harder raids, or the same way you might, an athlete might continuously run the 400 meter over and over until their time improves, right? It's that little itch to get better and better at something, and to especially when you're at the top level, that chasing that feeling of being the best just feels really good. It's a high, and it's a lot of fun when you get into the right mindset.
Absolutely. So now I want to one of my last questions about Mirror's Edge specifically is, do you think there's a story reason why people stay? What do you think of the Mirror's Edge story? Do you think the Mirror's Edge story is any good? I'm asking honestly because I'm not sure.
So I would love to hear your opinion on it as well, but I would say the story is probably the weakest aspect of it. The game is essentially just like a series of events that string you along through the levels they designed. And that is not necessarily a bad thing. Mirror's Edge Catalyst tried to do like a much more in-depth story with mixed results. So I don't know if I think maybe taking a hands-off approach and letting the gameplay shine was probably the right move for this game, but it's definitely not the strongest. And that makes sense. If you know anything about like the background of this game, about 90% of the content that was written for it was cut for time. So
Really?
yeah, there's like a little bit of lore like hidden away in some comics, some licensed comics they released, and a little bit of lore in like some like the game files, but so much of it was cut out, and I think it shows. The game is very bare bones in that sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. Celeste's transformation is a little like she just disappears after
He disappears
chapter
for 7 chapters, and you're like, oh, I guess I'm betrayed by this girl that I punched in the training. Unless I skip the training, then I don't know her.
My favorite moment, and I call this out every run I do, is at the very end. The game ends, the music plays, I have to mute it or I get DMCA'd. And as the music plays, the theme swells, you're just thinking, they're just stuck on the top of this skyscraper. The helicopter's gone. How are they getting down?
They're dead. They're dead. They die.
They're in a building we've already established is full of enemy soldiers. Like,
yeah, no, they're dead.
Yeah.
They're dead. There's a bit of in the credits dialogue. Now my headcanon, I like to think, is that they die, but in the credits dialogue, it says that they escape and that they're on the run. So apparently they.
Yeah, no way. That's not even my favorite loophole though. My favorite loophole would be them going like in chapter 8. Faith sends Hope to Merc's lair. I just call it Merc's lair. It seems like a lair, and knowing that they already know where it is. Celeste knows where it is. She obviously would have tipped them off. She's like, I'll send my sister to the one place that I know the bad guys know about. Bad guys, police, mercenaries. Is that ever established who we're killing? Who we're fighting?
I think that they're a private security firm that's been hired by the government.
Oh, then it's okay.
Oh, so it's completely fine, yeah.
Yeah, it's no worries. No worries. Mercenary lives don't matter, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's fine. They don't have families or anything, so who even cares, you know? Unless they do have families, but like whatever, who cares? They're just children. They'll get over it.
I remember when Undertale did that. It was like, all the people you're killing have families, you monster. How could you do this? I like playing a game sometimes where I can just let the story wash over me and I don't need to focus too much on what I'm doing. And I think it really does fit. I think you're absolutely right. The choices they made to focus on the story, not on the story, but on the gameplay was the correct result.
Yeah.
All right, and for my last series of questions, let's talk a little bit about the Mirror's Edge community. I see we actually have a couple of Mirror's Edge community members in the chat. Hello, Comrade Oger. Hello, Fedzor Official. So what is your take on the community in general? You said that it was one of the reasons that you stay, one of the reasons you enjoy Mirror's Edge. What do you think makes the Mirror's Edge community stand out from other speedrunning communities?
I think it's an awesome bunch of people. For the most part, you know, I think it's a lot of young 20-somethings, teenagers, like, who are all just like, we really like this game, we really like improving. You know, some of it, there's a little bit of, you know, commiserating, right? Like, the game is hard. It's nice to have like someone to lift you back up when you're down and out. But also, like, it's nice to have a group of people you can share accomplishments with. You can bounce ideas off of if you want to learn something or you're struggling with something. Mm-hmm. I think you can throw yourself at like a skip or a particular trick for hours and not get it. And sometimes like just 10 minutes with someone who's a better player than you or who has more knowledge than you could go so much further than just throwing yourself at the wall for an hour, right? Mm-hmm. And that sort of like lifting each other up, I think makes the whole experience fun and
Yeah, awesome. So as a community, are there any, and this is the point where you can plug whatever you want, are there any events that you guys put on, any tournaments, anything of that sort of nature that viewers can potentially check out and watch to get introduced to the community?
Yeah, I wish I had something like big event that I could plug right now, but I don't know that we have anything huge coming up. I think some of the things you can do are definitely go to speedrun.com/me or just search Mirror's Edge on speedrun.com. You can follow the game and you can get like updates when there's new world records. That's what I do, at least. You can also definitely make sure to like check out like the speedrunning marathons that come up. Particularly, I think a lot of people are into the ESA. ESA Summer is coming up next week. I don't know that Mirror's Edge is at that one, but always keep an eye out at GDQs and the ESAs for Mirror's Edge events. And yeah, also like we do a lot of like impromptu races and stuff. So if you are into just like playing the game casually or participating in a race, you can join our Discord and be a part of that.
Awesome.
At it, yeah.
Awesome. So one of my last questions, and this is where the question gets super hard. So I don't know where your stance is on this. Now, a bunch of people in my run, because I was doing glitchless category, started asking, is this true glitchless, or is this glitchy glitchless? What is your stance on the glitchless category? Because as someone who doesn't do glitches, I'm very familiar with the fact that many speedrunning communities have a little bit of friction around what's a glitch, what's not a glitch. Do we have a glitchless category at all?
You're asking the right guy for it.
Awesome.
The SGDQ run I did, it's kind of infamous, to be honest. Where
I don't know any about this. Would you mind elaborating on it?
No, I love that you're going into this blind, because typically when I go into these situations, everyone knows what I'm talking about, and I like that you don't. So essentially I did this run where that was kind of the whole gimmick, is I invited another Mirror's Edge runner to sit behind me on like the commentary couch, and he would just kind of playfully point out, like, is that a glitch? Like, that kind of looks like a glitch. And it's true. The game does... It's just essentially buggy. Like, everything about the game is just a little bit buggy. So even if you're playing the game in a pretty intended way, it's gonna look kind of buggy. And I was very tired. He was tired. It was a lot of dry sarcasm between us. The joke didn't quite land. And I ended up getting, like, put into, like, a compilation that got, like, 6 million views on YouTube of the run.
6 million?
Yeah.
You're a viral sensation. That's amazing.
Yeah, so, and I got a lot of hate. It was nothing, like, serious, but, like, a little bit of, like, bad juju thrown my way, right, from people who didn't quite understand the joke. And, I mean, to really go in depth about it, like, that's the thing. It's like, we, speedrunners, we kind of make up our own rules about everything. We decide when the timer starts. We decide when the timer ends. We decide what is and isn't allowed. You know, we decide if you're allowed to edit the frame rate. We decide if you're allowed to edit the FOV. Like, and we also, in certain categories, we decide what is or isn't a glitch. You know, what is just an exploit, a clever use of the game mechanics, and what is a glitch that should be disallowed, right? And I think if you're not like super in tune with the game or with the community, it's going to be really hard for an outside observer to understand why we pick certain things and why we don't pick certain things, right? And I could go like point by point for like an hour explaining to you why certain things are and aren't allowed, but it's not going to be helpful, right? So, long-winded way of saying, you know, people will always joke about a true glitchless category, but that's going to be different for every viewer. We can come up with a whole set of rules that just is play the game exactly as the developer intended, but what's the fun in that? There's no creativity. So we've had a lot of talks about this internally. I'm really happy with the way the glitchless rules are right now. They're a little more specific than they were back in 2017 when I did that run, and I garnered a lot of criticism, which I like. I like that they're more specific. But the spirit of the rules is the same, you know? We have certain things we allow, certain things we don't allow, and the category allows for a lot of freedom, which I love.
Jedi Fallen Order, which I played and do have a speedrun of, does not have any glitchless category. And I asked the community about that once, and they said it's all about the cutscenes. Is that the cutscenes are basically unskippable in Fallen Order. And have you ever played Fallen Order?
Played Fallen Order. I've also watched the speedrun at the last Games Done Quick, so I'm vaguely familiar with the any % route right now.
So you know that in a Jedi Fallen Order run, if you're not skipping the cutscenes are incredibly long. I think in my speedrun of Mirror's Edge, not Mirror's Edge, of Jedi Fallen Order, during the cutscene in Ilum, I actually went and made nachos and came back and ate like half my plate of nachos before the cutscene was done.
Right.
And yeah, so that's, you know, why? You're like, why developers, why?
Just a button, just add a button, just skip it, at least on the second playthrough.
Yeah. You would think. That's an interesting point, actually, now I've thought about that. So this is a lot of times people, and I want to give Mirror's Edge its credit. I want to give the due to EA and DICE, who I think put together a fantastic game, not monetized in the slightest, obviously. And a lot of times EA and DICE, I think, get a lot of crap, a lot of hate. People are like, oh, we don't like that you have to pay for Darth Vader or stuff and Battlefront 2 or whatever, and all these games. And I'm not saying any of that criticism isn't justified, but I think people forget the pros of a AAA studio, which is from time to time, a AAA studio can invest in a true risk. They have enough money to say, we're going to make this game, we're going to make it at the highest level we can make it, and it's a risk. Maybe we'll lose money on it, but we can afford to lose the money. Whereas an independent studio, maybe they can put together a game like Mirror's Edge. Maybe it bankrupts them if it doesn't succeed, you know? And that's I think, a scary thought for an independent studio. So that's one area where I think, you know, to get off my soapbox now, that big AAA companies are able to occasionally do some good things, and I think Mirror's Edge is included in the category. So as I move forward, and I think we'll wrap up the interview here. Is there any game that you have in mind that you think I should play next on my ultimate adventure to beat every game ever made without dying?
You know, if I had to go through the catalog of games I've speedrun that I think might be good for your challenge, the first thing that comes to mind is probably Dishonored.
Dishonored, okay.
Dishonored is like, in terms of a speedrun, it's probably like 40 minutes. It's funny that you just complained about unskippable cutscenes, because Dishonored is like, has a good 10-20 minutes of unskippable cutscenes in its hour to 2 hour run. But I think there's a good mix of, I know you're probably not going to be using glitches, but there's a lot of like cool game mechanics you can exploit. I think there's like a lot of cool routes that you can use through the levels, and it's a lot like Mirror's Edge in the sense that there's a lot of room for creativity in how you decide to use your blinks or how you decide to use your mechanics. I don't know if you played the game before, but it's very satisfying to go from bumbling through a level using stealth to just kind of like swords blazing, running through and slashing people. So that's probably what I'd recommend. Or maybe Portal is the other thing I'd throw out. But
Portal. I played Portal a lot back in the day. I had a lot of fun with that game. In the end, I always felt like I had some trouble speedrunning it, but maybe that one would be, you know, that or Dishonored. I will definitely give those a check. Well, is there any final things you want to say? Any questions you want to ask me before we break?
I guess I'll leave. I talked a lot about Mirror's Edge. I would love to hear your thoughts about Mirror's Edge as you kind of wrap up for all the. I think there's a lot of people from the community here who are just maybe seeing you for the first time. So what are your final thoughts on the game as you depart it?
If I had to rate Mirror's Edge 1 out of 10, I would probably give it a solid 7.5. Only because it is very short. Even for like a casual runner like myself, even for someone casually playing the game, it is not like a long game. Which I do miss a little bit. I do miss that the story is not complete. But the gameplay is amazing. It's the best part of it, by far. And I do really actually enjoy the soundtrack, as much as I can't listen to it by the end, because I'll get DMCA'd if I do. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you, copyright laws. But I think, you know, when you're playing, it's one of the first games that you play where you can, it's very easy to identify as the character. And you're supposed to identify as the character. If you play a game like Call of Duty, no one's running around thinking, I'm Soap. I live my life as Soap. No, they're putting themselves in that position. I am the centrist. I am Black Belt, whatever. Going through and doing all the things. Whereas there's not that thought when you're playing Mirror's Edge. You're thinking, I'm Faith. I'm running around, jumping, doing all the things. And I think there's something kind of valuable in that, and interesting. And the idea that Faith is such an iconic character, even though she's only around for like an hour and a half. And the fact that this game does have such staying power, where there's still buzz about it, as the hype from France and the EA just releasing a single poster of Mirror's Edge released. There's still some excitement out there, and some hope for a new game, and maybe we will get a new game. Maybe Faith will just show up as DLC in Dying Light. That would be kind of fun too.
That'd be so sick.
But yeah, solidly, I think that the game was a lot of fun to play. I think it took me about as long as I thought it would to get a deathless run, to get my free solo, and then I thought speedrunning went way faster than I thought it would. Kudos to people from the community for helping walk me through some of the better glitches. Not glitches, but the better tricks that I can use to make the run really interesting and really look good. I'm very happy with my time as it stands now. But yeah, I really enjoyed the game, and I would absolutely recommend it to anyone who is interested in getting into speedrunning as maybe their first game to try to speedrun. Because when you play the game, just on a regular playthrough, even the most casual runner of the game, someone who's playing it for the first time, you know you're supposed to be doing it like a speedrun, because you're supposed to be running fast from whatever is behind you. And that, I think, is what makes it such a great foundational game to get into speedrunning. And then also, if you want to hang out there for another couple months or a couple years, or you want to devote the rest of your life to it, you know, the game has options for all of those people. But again, thank you so much for coming by. I thought this was a very successful interview. I don't know if you thought the same.
I had a lot of fun. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I'll probably try to catch up with the Fallen Order community next, since I'd already finished that game and I hadn't come up with this idea yet. But thank you again. Everyone give a warm round of applause to Black Belt for dropping by.
Thank you. If you want to see more of me, I'll be running at ESA Marathon this weekend. I'm doing like a 4-minute run of Sponge Glock Square Pin. So if you have 5 free minutes at like 6 p.m. Eastern on this Sunday, stop on by. There's also more charity stuff going on that weekend, so you should definitely check out ESA Marathon coming up.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
Bye.